and welcome back to another episode of Quick Spin, the Autoweek podcast that gets at the essence of the automobile. Today, we are talking about the 2021 Mercedes-Maybach GLS 600. That's right, the SUV Maybach. You can take a look at this Maybach on our Instagram page right now. That's at Autoweek USA. And hey, while you're there, why don't you click over to our Facebook page, click that like button. That way you get all the great Autoweek content we deliver daily sent directly to you. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about this Maybach in just 1 second, but first we have to pay the bills. Want to go behind the scenes with the editors of Autoweek Car and Driver and Road and Track? Become a member of the Track Club and receive 6 supersized issues of the new Road and Track, plus access to digital content, dozens of partner privileges, exclusive invites to editorial events, and first dibs on insider automotive events both online and around the world. Hop on in by visiting roadandtrack.com/Autoweek. That's ROADANDTRACK.com/AUTOWEEK. And Mr. Raynal, tell me about this Maybach. Now, this is not a sedan Maybach.
It's a GLS-based Maybach. So what that means is with Benz's not so new anymore nomenclature, you take GL, which is a crossover, and the S, which is S-Class, and you have the S-Class of GLSs, the S-Class of GLs, which is the GLS, and they did a Maybach version. So that's what we have here. It starts at $161, and it's extremely everything. It's extremely luxurious. It's silky smooth, flashy to look at. I hate to say how much I enjoyed driving it.
Let's be clear. The GLS, in and of itself, is a cavernous 3-row SUV crossover, whatever you want to call it these days. And adding the Maybach bits and pieces, it's probably nicer than my house, and probably, also more comfortable.
Well, here's the thing. It's called the GLS 600, which, if you're familiar with Benz's over the years, you think, oh, it's got a 12-cylinder, a 6-liter 12-cylinder. No, it doesn't. Even though it's called GLS 600, it's got a twin-turbo V8. That said, it still makes 558 horsepower, and this baby can hit 60 miles an hour in almost 4.5 seconds. And I'd be willing to bet you it weighs close to 5,500, 6,000 pounds. So that's some motivation right there. That's some good 0 to 60 numbers. It's the thing that blew my mind about the car mostly was the smoothness going down the road. There's not a pothole in Detroit that I found that upset the way this car rode. Just smooth as silk everywhere I went. Freeway, secondary roads, side streets, you name it. Just solid and smooth.
And that's saying a lot, because for those that aren't familiar with modern Mercedes or modern Maybachs, this is not sitting on a little wheel with a big sidewall tire. This is a small aspect ratio tire on a big wheel, right?
Right. The magic is the air suspension. The joke is you feel like you're riding on air. Well, because you are. And it really is smooth as silk. Quiet, too. Very quiet out on the freeway. I love me a quiet car. And this thing was tremendously quiet. And it's the air suspension. You can adjust it, soft, medium, hard, that kind of thing. I always put those things in soft and just leave them. But no matter what mode I tried, it just was smooth as silk.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing all about that when you drive it, which is coming up in a little bit. But you also gave this thing a little walk around, which is always a fun time, hearing the facts and features of these cars, and I'm sure this Maybach is no exception. So I will say, let's cut to that.
I'm sitting in the lovely interior of the 2021 GLS 600 4MATIC, and it is kind of amazing. The back seats they recline like on a 747 when you're flying across the ocean. It's a very cool thing. In front of me is a 28.5-inch screen that houses the gauges as well as all the infotainment that you could ever want to play with. A lot of cool stuff to play with, and nav, Bluetooth, of course. Basically, the whole setup is done through this screen of the vehicle. The ride, the handling, what color you want, the ambient lighting. Of course, you can change that, and you can control it via the touch screen or through the. There's a little mouse pad on the center console. The build quality is really, really good, and heated and cooled everything, of course. Comfortable seats, power, everything, you name it, it's got it. All kinds of connectivity, as much connectivity as you'd ever want. So let's take this baby for a ride.
And a ride we will go. But first, more questions, Mr. Raynal. Let's, real fast, this is not necessarily pertinent to just this Maybach, but basically all vehicles right now. You mentioned a 28-inch across screen. That's also including the gauge cluster. That's a bigger diagonal screen than my first television set, which I believe was a massive 13 inches.
Well, yeah, and it's one piece. It's like this one long, it's like two iPods stuck together into one sort of horizontal iPad. That's sort of what it looks like. And to your point, the infotainment is there, and then straight in front of you, of course, is the instruments, speedometer and tachometer and fuel and such. So my one beef, this brings us to my one beef with the whole car, and I mentioned it in that walk around, is the little mouse pad. You can also control all that stuff. And I found that kind of annoying. The touch screen was much easier to maneuver than the silly little mouse pad. So I never really messed with the mouse pad. The problem is sometimes you rest your hand there and it changes something that you didn't want to change. So I found the whole touchpad-y thing sort of annoying. Other than that, the interior is sublime, and I got to tell you, those back seats were pretty fun. I just went out there and sat in them for about 15 minutes one day and just soaked it all in.
Well, luxuriating in this thing seems reasonable, but can you talk about the materials really fast? Because when you say Maybach, you get this image of, ultra luxury. Like, I wouldn't say necessarily Rolls level of luxury, but like to that level, right?
Well, I mean, the thing about the cars of this ilk is what looks like wood is wood. What looks like aluminum is aluminum. What looks like carbon is carbon, et cetera, et cetera. If it looks like leather, it's leather. There's nothing fake about the interior on cars like this. So, by their very nature, they're going to be luxurious. And the Germans do a particularly good job of screwing these types of things together. Now, Cadillac and Lincoln are on their heels like they never have been before. But this thing is really, really luxurious and well put. It's not just the material, it's the assembly, I guess, is the short answer to your question. That separates a car like this from sort of the also-rans.
But I want to hear how this thing drives. I'm really looking forward to it, considering you said it was so nice. So let's go to that right now.
There's a couple of things that stand out as I cruise down the road in this GLS 600. One is the silky, creamy ride. I don't really remember a vehicle that rides as smooth as this and shrugs off potholes and road imperfections like this. I certainly don't remember a SUV doing it. I mean, this thing just floats down the road beautifully. And the name is a little bit of a misnomer because usually with Mercedes, with the 600 name, that means V12, but this has a 4-liter twin-turbo V8, nothing to sneeze at, 550 horsepower, and a lot of torque, 538 pounds-feet of torque or something, made to a 9-speed automatic transmission, but it's the air suspension. Besides the luxuriness of the interior and those bucket seats out back that have, they're like on an airplane and they have real live power footrests. I mean, you can definitely recline back there. So those of the ilk who buy this to be driven and have a driver, execs and such, certainly do have a lovely place to spend their time sitting in the back. But since we're driving it, I can comment on the air suspension, and it's a perfect name for it because it feels like you're riding on air. It's pretty amazing the way the body stays level. I mean, this thing's got to weigh close to 6,000 pounds. The body stays nice and level. And like I said, it just shrugs off every nasty bit of road out there. It just glides along beautifully. And like I said, 550 horsepower, that's pretty stout. The thing does get up and boogie pretty good. So I didn't get into the price earlier. It's $165,850, which, is going to make some people gasp. My car has a couple of options. That 4-seat configuration that I talked about is $1,100, and I would definitely spring for that. And then, of course, there's a refrigerated compartment back there for the champagne, $1,800. The folding tables in the back, $1,000. So all told, $165,850. You know, like I said, a price that makes you suck in your breath a little bit, but you know, the people that buy these aren't worried about how much they cost. And you know, if I was a player in this realm and in this marketplace, I would certainly consider one of these.
If there's a young person in your life who's really into cars, give them the gift of R&T Crew, the ultimate subscription box by Road and Track for kids ages 6 to 10. Every other month, a box is delivered to their door and stuffed with cool accessories, fun activities, and a magazine chock full of facts, stories, games, and more. Sign up now to receive the all-new Around the World box and enter code Autoweek for 10% off the annual box subscription. Just head over to rtcrew.com, that's rtcrew.com, and use code Autoweek. Just to be clear, you were driving, right?
Yeah, that's the whole point of I mean, it sounds like I'm in a living room. And quite honestly, it feels like you're in a living room in some ways.
So the listeners can agree. Like, I am doing this in my house, which I believe has worse acoustics, good and bad, than this Maybach. That's insane.
It's insanely quiet and insanely smooth. I guess you could put it that way. It's a very, 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 very nice SUV. Here's something weird about it, though. Because of those buckets in the back, there's no third row. And they also cut into what cargo capacity there is back there, even with 2 rows. So if you're into this thing for a little bit of cargo capacity, you'll be a little bit bummed out. But I don't think there's going to be too many people that care.
Well, why have cargo when you have a wine refrigerator in your car? Isn't that all the cargo you have? I mean, your wine and your golf clubs?
Yeah, and you're being driven.
That is true.
So,
and, well, it seems like we're getting closer and closer to that question that we've all been waiting for. I've been waiting for it anyway, and I'm sure you have as well, Mr. Wes Raynal. Here on A Quick Spin, we try to get to the essence of an automobile, and the Mercedes-Maybach GLS 600, what a mouthful, is no exception. Mr. Raynal, what is the essence of this big piece of luxury here? What's its raison d'etre?
I think it's the GLS turned up to 11 in terms of luxury and pampering and smoothness. You know, it's sort of fit for a king, really. It's the GLS, not on steroids, but it's been to the luxury spa for a couple of months.
Well, that sounds fair. And I'm sure, one last question before we go, because this is not the only super expensive GLS you can buy, right? You can also buy a GLS 63, which is the AMG variant and more sportive, as the French would say. What's the distinction between the two?
I think that 63, it's got more horsepower. It's quicker. I'm sure it's more raw. I think the Maybach is way skewed toward the luxury and the smoothness and the pampering and riding in the back, driven where they need to be, driven to their private jets. They're not doing the driving. Whereas the 63, I think, is much more of a car for a guy who more of a sporting car than this.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. But I think that's a great place to put a pin in this one. Thank you, Mr. Raynal, for having to suffer through driving this Maybach. I know it was probably a rough go, but hey, somebody has to do it.
Bit of a chore, but I managed.
Yeah, those heating and massaging seats probably.
I came out on the other side, so all good.
Yeah, it's a rough life you live, Mr. Raynal. It's a rough life.
I understand.
Speaking of rough lives, no, I'm just kidding. Hey, why don't you head over to Apple Podcasts and do us a favor, click that 5-star, drop us a review. We will give you a shout out. I will say it right now. Well, obviously not right now because you're listening to this right now. So when you're listening to a future show, you'll hear your name right here. But also, hey, while you're doing that, why don't you head over to our Facebook, click that like button. That way you get all the great Autoweek content we deliver daily. And I say this at the end of every show, and I mean it. Without your listenership, none of this would be possible. So thank you for listening.